In the sun-baked, salt-crusted coastal town of Kita, where the Atlantic Ocean whispers ancient secrets onto the shore, lived a man named Kwame. But calling him a man of truth would be like calling a vulture a songbird. Kwame wasn't like the common market prankster or the tired old man who exaggerated a fishing haul. No, Kwame was an ambitious liar, a weaver of grand, shimmering illusions that made the honest work of the town look gray and dull. Welcome to real-life African stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss any of our tales. He didn't just tell small, harmless lies to save his skin. He built entire kingdoms of deceit. One day he was a successful ship captain with vessels sailing the Gulf of Guinea. The next, a wealthy gold merchant waiting for a shipment of alluvial dust from Burkina Faso. He'd stand at the fish market, immaculate in a clean white shirt, likely borrowed, waving his hands as if shooing away imaginary creditors. He spoke of investments, of mansions in Accra, of deals so big they made the local chief's cattle look like ants. And the tragedy of it was, he was so charismatic, so utterly convincing, that people often suspended their common sense just to listen. Kwame was the drummer of empty words, and the whole town danced to his beat. The only person who truly suffered under this constant cascade of falsehoods was his mother, May Mabina. She was a small, devout woman, her hands calloused from years of mending nets and her knees hardened from constant kneeling. Her life was a quiet, relentless prayer for her son's soul. Every morning, she lit a kerosene lamp and spoke to the heavens, begging that Kwame's gilded tongue would one day taste the bitter root of truth before it was too late. She knew, with the quiet certainty of a mother, that every grand lie he told hammered one more crack into the foundation of his luck. Saturday night in Kita belonged to the Lighthouse, a ramshackle bar perched precariously close to the breaking waves. It reeked of sea salt, the sharp sting of akpateshi, the potent local gin, and the delicious smell of fried snapper. Inside, the noise was a joyful, deafening mix of high-life music and shouting men. Kwame sat in his usual spot, bathed in the dim red glow of a single hanging bulb. His fake gold chain glinted on his chest. Tonight, he was claiming to have just sold a yacht to a Nigerian oil magnate. "The man begged me, I tell you," Kwame roared, slamming his glass down. He said, "Kwame, only you can procure a vessel of such magnificence." His two closest friends, the perpetually skeptical Kofi and the dry-witted Igbo, were already 2 bottles deep into their palm wine. They were the unwilling audience, his necessary witnesses. "Magnificence," Kofi repeated, wiping palm wine from his beard. "Kwame, last week you were eating my leftover kenki. Did the magnificence forget to feed you?" Kwame laughed, a booming, confident sound that masked the sting of the truth. "You small-minded fisherman. That was a test. I was testing the loyalty of the common man, seeing who would share with a poor man." "Passed, Kofi. You passed," Igbo snorted, pouring himself another measure of gin. "Kwame, your tests are as real as your yachts. You are a clever man, but your mouth is too big. You have the heart of a timid mouse and the tongue of a cobra." Kwame's smile hardened. This was the moment of challenge, and he loved it. "Timid? Me? I have walked among lions, Igbo. I fear nothing in this life or the next." "Oh, nothing." Igbo leaned forward, his eyes glinting with malicious sobriety. "Not even the ancestral grove." Silence fell momentarily around their table. The grove was not just a cemetery. It was a dense, eerie mangrove swamp where the great chiefs and wise men of Kita were laid to rest. It was protected by old taboos and whispered warnings. At its heart lay the grave of Togbitsoli, an ancient fisherman and oathkeeper renowned for his relentless hatred of falsehood. They said Solly could not rest because of the lies spoken by the living. Kwame forced a nonchalant shrug. The Grove. Please. I know that place like my own bedroom. Once, I was dared to steal a trinket from the old fetish shrine inside. I did it. The dead can't touch me. Ebo slammed his fist on the table, the sound startling a nearby drinker. Lies. That is the greatest lie you've spun all year, Kwame. You wouldn't dare step foot in that place after sundown. Everyone knows the air turns heavy there. You challenge me, Ebo. Kwame stood up, his chair scraping back dramatically. I challenge your great courage, Ebo hissed. Talk is cheap. If you are truly fearless, you will go now tonight. Not to steal a trinket, but to show ultimate disrespect. You will defile the largest marker you can find in the grove. If you come back and swear upon the ocean that you did it, I will work for you for a month. But if you fail, you must speak the truth, and only the truth for a full week. Kwame paused for only a second, his mind racing. The gin burned hot in his veins, and the crowd, drawn by the shouted challenge, was watching. Losing the dare meant a week of honesty, a fate worse than death itself. Done, Kwame announced, buttoning his shirt like a warrior preparing for battle. Tonight, I will make the ancestors jealous of my arrogance. He stumbled out of the lighthouse, followed by Kofi and Ebo, who were more anxious than celebratory now. The moon was a pale, watchful disk above the swaying palms. The ancestral grove sat where the land gave up its claim to the sea, a dark, suffocating patch of knotted roots and damp earth. As they approached, the high-life music from the bar faded, replaced by the persistent, chilling hiss of the wind through the mangrove leaves. Kwame, let's stop, Kofi whispered nervously, his bravery evaporating. This is madness. Kwame ignored him. He found a broken path and pushed through the dense brush until he reached the clearing where the oldest stone stood. His eyes, now wide and cold, fixed on a towering moss-covered tombstone, carved with the image of a fisherman's canoe. It was known to be the marker for Togbeat Solly. With a reckless, drunken swagger, Kwame unzipped his trousers. Watch, you cowards, he muttered, forcing a laugh that was choked by the sudden silence of the forest. He began his act of deliberate desecration, humming a tune as the sound of trickling filled the unnatural quiet. But then the air changed. The moonlight seemed to shrink, pulling back from the grave. The stench of brine and rot thickened into a sudden, suffocating cloud. Kwame paused mid-act. Just as he finished, before he could zip up, a sound pierced the air. The sharp, unmistakable crack of a whip cutting the air, not nearby but right beside his ear. He froze, heart pounding against his ribs like a frantic bird. The sound was immediately followed by a rush of wind so dry it felt hot, carrying the distinct, unsettling rustle of rushing sand. Not the sand of the beach, but the dry, parched sound of something ancient and lifeless. Kwame zipped up in a frantic panic. He looked down at the grave. The earth was undisturbed. The moss on the stone was still wet from the dew. But he knew, in a primal, sober moment, that he had been heard. It's the wind, he stammered, forcing himself to run. He didn't look back. He ran so fast his slippers flapped against his heels. When he finally reached his friends, who were waiting further down the path, his chest was heaving, but he forced a triumphant, hollow laugh. See, he gasped, patting his chest. Nothing. The spirits are my boys, just like I said. Kofi and Ebo didn't laugh. They just stared at him with wide, sober eyes. They led him home, but as Kwame walked, he couldn't shake the strange feeling that his mouth was suddenly dry, and that a single rough grain of sand had been carried into his life by the wind of the ancestral grove. He had mocked the ultimate keeper of oaths, and the price, though silent for now, had been settled. He had challenged the dead, and the dead had answered. The sun rose over Kita, painting the ocean surface in hues of gold and copper, but for Kwame the morning was dull and grey. He woke not to the clammy, soaking shame of a wet bed, but to something far more insidious. He stretched, felt the pleasant dryness of the mat beneath him, and then opened his mouth to groan from the headache, which felt like a blacksmith hammering inside his skull. He tried to cough. A sound, rough and dry as coconut husk, scraped in his throat. He tried to speak the name of his mother, May Mabina. His mouth formed the shape, his diaphragm pushed, but all that escaped was a pathetic high-pitched squeak, thin and weak as the cry of a newborn mouse. Kwame sat bolt upright. Panic, cold and sharp, shot through him. He cleared his throat violently, trying to summon the booming voice that had filled bars and markets. He tried to shout, to whisper, to hum the tune he'd been humming at the ancestral grove. Nothing. His throat was tight, constricted, as if bound by invisible twine. The mighty orator, the man whose lies were his currency, was rendered absolutely mute. His gilded tongue, the instrument of his arrogance, was now a piece of worthless metal. He rushed to the small mirror, gaping at his reflection. His eyes were wide with terror. He tried one last time, putting all his strength into a simple curse. The sound was barely audible, a dry, rasping breath that died instantly in the air. The shame arrived swiftly, a heavy blanket of humiliation. His usual Saturday routine involved a grand entrance, a loud greeting, and a lie about why he was late. Today he shuffled into the yard. His friend Kofi arrived first, still nursing a hangover. "Kwame, where is your big mouth this morning?" "Still recovering from the spirits of the jinn, eh?" Kofi chuckled, then stopped when he saw the desperate silent plea in Kwame's eyes. Kwame opened his mouth and pointed to his throat, trying to mimic speech. He looked like a fish gasping for air. Kofi's mockery only grew louder. "Ah, so the great speaker is struck dumb. The spirit of the drink has finally claimed your voice. Did you see a ghost at the grove, Kwame? Tell us, Kwame, tell us." When Ebo arrived, however, the atmosphere shifted from cruel jokes to genuine alarm. Ebo tried everything, offering water, demanding he cough, even yelling at him. Kwame could only shake his head, tears of frustration welling in his eyes. The mighty orator was trapped in a silence louder than any shout. His power was gone, replaced by a pathetic, embarrassing silence. May Mabina needed no diagnosis from the hospital. When she saw the sheer terror in her son's eyes, and the desperate way he gestured, she knew. This was not a physical ailment. This was the work of the land. She remembered the warnings about Togbit Sully, the oath-keeper, and the ancient stories of how he hated falsehood. Her heart sank. Her son had not just offended the dead. He had mocked the very spirit of truth. She silently began to pray, her lips moving rapidly, a desperate, quiet plea for mercy to the God above and the ancestors below. The humiliation was absolute. Kwame had a small job as a dock loader, a job he always dismissed as a side hustle before his real business ventures. He tried to show up, hoping to command the workers with gestures, but without his loud, commanding voice, his authority vanished. When he tried to complain about the heat, the gesture was misinterpreted, and he was handed a fish bucket. The workers, who once tolerated his arrogance, now ignored him completely. People who had laughed with his stories now openly laughed at his silence. His former identity dissolved under the weight of his own sudden anonymity. Later that afternoon, sitting alone and defeated, Kwame was visited by Ebo. Ebo, now remorseful, handed him a small pad of paper and a pen. "Here, Kwame. Write down what you need. Write what happened. Maybe you can explain this terrible joke." Kwame snatched the pen gratefully. His mind immediately leaped to a grand, face-saving lie. He couldn't simply admit he was cursed. He needed a cover story, a tale of intrigue that would restore his reputation. He would write that he was working on a secret high-stakes deal, and that the powerful people involved had forced him to take an oath of absolute silence until the contract was signed. He pressed the pen to the paper and began to write, "I am currently negotiating a highly confidential shipping contract with." But before he could finish the word confidential, he paused. A strange feeling washed over his fingers. As the black ink settled on the page, it did not dry. It transformed. With a fine, chilling hissing sound, the ink instantly crystallized, turning into a tiny, fine black sand. A minute gust of dry wind, confined only to the space above the paper, caught the sand and blew the remnants of the lie away, leaving the paper blank and pristine. Kwame stared, horrified. He tried again, writing a smaller, simpler lie. "I was attacked by thieves who spiked my drink." The same eerie hiss, the same instantaneous crystallization, the same puff of dry, black sand, leaving nothing behind. He tried a simple truth. "I am thirsty." The words remained clearly, black ink on white paper. Kwame dropped the pen as if it had burned him. The true horror of the curse settled upon him like a shroud. It wasn't just his voice that was gone. It was his ability to spread falsehood in any form. His gilded tongue had been struck by a curse of absolute, enforced truth. The sound of the rushing sand he had heard at the grove was the sound of his lies being erased from the fabric of the world. Togbitsali, the oath-keeper, had not simply muted him. He had bound him. If Kwame could not speak truth, he could not speak at all. If he tried to write a lie, the sand of silence would void it. The man who lived by lies was now forced to live only by truth, a cruel irony that felt like a life sentence. His ordeal had only just begun. May Mabina dragged Kwame to the town clinic as if he were a particularly heavy sack of cassava. She was a woman of faith, but she also believed in exhausting all conventional options before resorting to the spiritual ones. Kwame shuffled along, his head bowed, the shame of his enforced silence and the terrifying memory of the sand ink clinging to him. The hospital smelled of iodine and bored resignation. They were ushered into the small office of Dr. Ajay, a young, highly skeptical man fresh out of the city's university. He barely looked up from his clipboard. "So, Mr. Kwame, what is the problem?" Dr. Ajay asked, tapping his pen. May Mabina stepped forward, twisting the end of her scarf. "Doctor, my son cannot speak. His voice is gone. He woke up dumb after a night of foolishness." The doctor frowned and gestured for Kwame to sit. "Nonsense, no one wakes up dumb. It's likely a severe case of laryngitis or nerve inflammation. Now, Kwame, try to tell me how you injured your throat. Did you drink something corrosive? Yell too much? Fight someone?" Kwame, desperate to hide the truth of the ancestral grove, tried to concoct a lie using his voice. He strained, pushing air from his lungs, attempting to narrate a story about a mugging where a thief had choked him. But the words that scratched out were pathetic, high-pitched, and brutally honest. I was at the cemetery. I drank too much gin and I defiled a grave. The grave of Togbitsali." May Mabina gasped and covered her mouth. Dr. Ajay paused with his pen halfway to the paper, a perplexed look on his face. "Togbi what? Mr. Kwame, please be serious. We need clinical facts, not village folklore. Kwame tried again, attempting to backtrack, to weave a lie about drinking bad palm wine. But his will was useless against the curse. The voice that emerged was a tight, truthful squeak. I lied to my friends that I was brave. I am a fearful man. I did it because Ebo dared me, and I wanted them to pay for my drinks. The doctor pinched the bridge of his nose, clearly thinking the man was delirious. He scribbled a note. Patient is experiencing acute hysterical aphonia combined with delusional thought patterns. All right, forget the cemetery, Dr. Ajay said, sighing. I need to run tests. Now, before you came in, what was the last unusual thing you did or consumed? Kwame, bound by the terrible magic, tried to lie about eating spoiled food. The truthful sound scraped out. I know you charge the government for 3 times the medication you actually dispense here. You told my mother the price of the malaria drug was 50 sadies, but your ledger says 20. The pen fell from Dr. Ajay's hand and clattered onto the desk. His eyes widened, his professional composure shattering. Get out, he barked, pointing an accusing finger at Kwame. You are making false accusations. I am a respected man. Plot twist. The waiting room door burst open. It was the head nurse, Madame Grace, who had been listening intently. Wait, Dr. Ajay, is that true? 50 sadies. I knew that pricing was wrong. Chaos erupted instantly. Other patients, hearing the involuntary truth-telling, demanded to see their bills. Kwame's curse, the truth curse, had accidentally exposed the doctor's minor scam, and his throat problems were forgotten in the ensuing pandemonium. May Mabina quickly hustled her son out, realizing the hospital could neither cure nor contain him. The next stop was the spiritual realm. Nana Awusi's shrine was located at the edge of the lagoon, hidden beneath a canopy of vibrant, noise-absorbing trees. Nana Awusi, the so-called river diva, was a figure of dramatic power, adorned in white cloth and cowrie shells, her voice deep and melodic. When she saw Kwame, she gave a slow, knowing smile. Ah, the small child who spat on the earth's resting garment. You think the ancestors are like bank managers who forget a debt? May Mabina dropped to her knees. Nana, please. The doctors failed. The water has dried up, but the voice is gone. Nana Awusi did not speak. She commanded her drummers to begin a rapid, pulsing rhythm. She scooped lagoon water into a shining brass bowl, chanting in a powerful ancient language. She sprinkled the water over Kwame's head and commanded the spirit of lies to leave his body. Kwame felt a surge of energy, a desperate hope. Perhaps the curse is broken. He grabbed a nearby slate meant for prayer requests and, heart-hammering, decided to test the curse. He pressed the chalk hard and attempted to write the grandest lie of all. I am a powerful, cured man, and I will be rich by Tuesday. The moment the chalk hit the slate, the rhythmic drumming stuttered and died. The chalk line did not remain white. It erupted with a dry, sharp hiss. The chalk dust instantly transformed into a fine, sparkling black sand, identical to the ink sand from before. It covered the slate, then, caught by an invisible breeze, the silent sand blew away, leaving the slate terrifyingly clean. Nana Awusi's eyes went wide. She bent down, delicately gathering a pinch of the sand on her palm. She rubbed it slowly, her face etched with awe and fear. This is not water. This is not fire, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sudden silence. This is the sand of absolute truth. The land itself has spoken. Togbitsali, the Oathkeeper, has not punished you with physical pain, but with truth itself. The revelation of the truth curse. She turned to Kwame, her eyes piercing. You are not mute, my son. You are bound. Your words must be the absolute, unvarnished truth, or they are cancelled, voided by the sand, erased from the world. Every lie you speak or write will be met by that dry, rustling wind, rendering you silent once more until the truth is spoken. Your tongue is still gilded, but it is now plated in the truth you despise. Nana Awusi stood and pointed a steady finger toward the west. There is only one cure for a penance of the soul. Penance of the soul. The grove demands a payment. You must go back to the grave. You must confess 3 profound, life-altering truths, lies you have lived by for years. She paused, her voice rising to a dramatic, firm command. And you must do it in the presence of someone you have deeply wronged. Sali despises the secret liar most of all. Go and find the person whose life you damaged the most with your arrogance, and confess your deepest falsehoods to them. Only then will the tongue be partially freed. Go, Kwame. The earth requires a reckoning. Kwame stood there, trembling. He had wanted a simple potion, a quick spell. Instead, he was handed a sentence of agonizing public exposure. He had to face his victims. He had to expose his very identity as a fraud. He had to pay his debt in the coin of his soul. The words of Nana Awusi, "You must confess 3 profound truths to someone you have deeply wronged," were a sentence, not a cure. Kwame stumbled out of the shrine, his head spinning. He knew instantly who his victim must be. It was not his friends, whose losses were merely a few rounds of gin. It was Ajoa. Years ago, Kwame had charmed Ajoa, a beautiful, hard-working young woman, with his glittering tales of future wealth. He'd convinced her to invest her entire life savings, the seed money for her own roadside food stall, into one of his fabricated import deals. The deal, of course, was a lie. He'd used every last sadi to pay off his own crippling gambling debts before anyone found out. When the deal collapsed, Ajoa lost everything. She lost her business, her trust, and her spirit. She was the anchor he had cut loose to save his sinking self. She was the one who deserved his confession most. It took him an entire morning to find her. She was now running a tiny, struggling stall near the outskirts of Kita, selling cold water and sweets under a tattered canvas. Her eyes, once bright with ambition, were now weary, focused only on the dust and the slow passage of customers. Kwame approached her slowly, mute and carrying a heavy heart that felt like a boulder in his chest. He clutched his notepad and pen, the instruments of his humiliation. Ajoa looked up, recognizing the boastful man whose face had once shone with false promise. Her expression was a complicated mix of surprise, bitterness, and indifference. She didn't ask how he was, she didn't care. Kwame opened his mouth to greet her, but only the pathetic squeak emerged. He swallowed the shame, pulled out the notepad, and began to write, his hand trembling. He knew the paper would only accept the truth. He wrote, pressing the pen hard, letting the agony of the truth flow onto the page. Ajoa, I am here because I have been cursed into telling the truth. I lied about the money. There was no import deal. I used your entire savings, the 2,000 sadis you gave me, to pay off my own gambling debts in Accra. I did not lose it in business. I stole it for my own cowardice. I am truly sorry. Ajoa took the notepad. As she read the words, her eyes scanned them once, twice, then her jaw slowly dropped. Confusion morphed into a crushing realization, and then a burning, justified rage. She didn't shout, she began to shake, her voice low and dangerously controlled. You looked me in the eyes, Kwame. You watched me cry for weeks. You knew I was sleeping on the floor. And you let me believe it was the market that failed me. Tears finally overwhelmed her, and she snatched the notepad, throwing it to the ground. She turned her back on him, sobbing violently, the sound sharp as glass in the afternoon air. Kwame could only stand there, mute, drenched in the consequences of his first truth. He picked up the notepad, the pen still cold in his hand. He knew he had to deliver the second truth immediately, a final cut to expose the rot beneath his charm. He wrote a deeply personal truth, a secret so dark and deep, he hadn't admitted it even to himself. I lied about my feelings for you too. I did not love you. I wanted you because you were smart and you had money. I knew you would save me from being alone and poor. I was never good enough for you, and I lied to keep you because I was afraid of the real man beneath the suit. Ajoa turned back, her face streaked with tears, but now mixed with a chilling contempt. She read the note and simply spat on the ground near his feet. You are less than the dirt, Kwame. Go. He should have gone, but the curse, the penance, demanded the third and final truth. He knew it could only be the truth of his identity. He gestured for her to follow him. He needed her as a witness, as commanded by the oracle. She hesitated, but something in his desperately silent plea compelled her. They walked silently, the dust tasting like ash in Kwame's throat, back toward the humid, whispering gloom of the ancestral grove. They reached the clearing. The great tombstone of Togbitsali stood silent and foreboding. Kwame dropped to his knees in the damp earth, placing the notepad on the stone itself. Ajoa stood behind him, arms folded, a silent judge. Kwame took a long, shaking breath and began to write the ultimate lie he had lived, the grand fiction he had used to construct Kwame, the charming liar. Old man Tsali and Ajoa, I confess the greatest lie. I have been pretending my whole life. I am not even Kwame. My real name is Kwadwo. I ran away from my poor village in the Volta Highlands after I was branded a thief for stealing my own mother's heirloom bangle to afford a new, lying life here in Kita. Every story, every boast, every word spoken by Kwame was a shield built over the shame of Kwadwo, the thief. As the pen finished the final word, a sensation unlike any before overcame him. The words on the paper began their familiar, terrible change. The ink transformed, hissing into the black sand, but this time the sound was softer, almost weary. The dry wind that usually scattered the remnants lingered, then faded slowly, pulling back into the earth. From deep beneath the roots and the stones a sound rose. It was not the crack of a whip, nor the sharp hiss of pure denial. It was a faint, low breath in the air, dry and resigned, that seemed to say, "The debt is noted." Kwame felt a release in his chest, a physical, immediate loosening of the invisible bonds around his throat. He gasped. He lifted his head, shocked, and instinctively tried to speak his old name. Kwame. I mean Kwadwo, he stammered. And the sound was there. His voice was back. Not loud, not booming, but a real, true, audible voice. The curse of absolute silence was lifted. The partial resolution. Ajoa was left stunned, looking from the new man kneeling in the dirt to the pristine sand-free paper on the tombstone. But as Kwadwo, the newly christened truth-teller, began to rise, he felt a strange, dry catch in his throat. He tried to give Ajoa one last, small, self-serving lie, a tiny lie to soften the blow. I only borrowed the money, I was going to pay you back next month. Before the lie could fully form, a brief, dry cough escaped him, and his mouth was instantly filled with a bitter taste of dry sand. His tongue began to swell, thick and painful, making speech impossible until he gasped the truth. No! I knew I would never pay you back. The swelling receded instantly. The sand taste was gone. The curse was not vanquished. It was merely reformed. Kwame, now Kwadwo, had been given his voice back, but it was now permanently regulated. Any attempt to utter or write a lie would trigger that sudden, painful cough and the swelling, forcing a panicked silence until he spoke the truth. The curse was no longer an annihilator of communication, but a relentless reformer of character. He had learned the hard way that truth, once demanded, can never be fully escaped. The man who walked back into Kita was not Kwame, the strutting master of illusion. He was Kwadwo, the penitent thief. He could speak, but his voice was now measured, soft and careful, like a musician playing an instrument he'd almost broken. The booming arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet, watchful sincerity. He was, to the enduring fascination of the town, the man who only speaks truth. His old friends, Kofi and Ebo, were the first to encounter the new Kwadwo. They found him at the dock, dressed in simple, worn clothes, doing honest work, loading baskets of fish. "Kwame, you are cured," Kofi shouted, slapping him on the back. "Tell us a story. Tell us how you outsmarted the Juju man." Kwadwo turned and spoke slowly, his words clear, yet stripped bare of decoration. "I did not outsmart anyone. I was cursed because I am a coward and a liar, and the cure required me to confess my crimes to Ajoa. I am sorry for my past lies." Kofi and Ebo exchanged nervous glances. The truth was inconveniently heavy. They tried to ask him to join them for a drink, but Kwadwo's newfound honesty made their company awkward. "I will not join you," Kwadwo stated plainly. "Last night I stole a piece of smoked fish from the market because I was hungry and too proud to ask for charity. I must spend this evening working to pay the woman back. I have no money for gin." His friends quickly backed away. The constant need for brutal honesty made them uncomfortable. Their world was built on small, necessary deceptions, and Kwadwo's presence felt like a spotlight on their own minor hypocrisies. Kwadwo's new life was one of simple, demanding labor. He found work as a fisherman, an honest trade where the success of your labor was visible in your nets, not your boasts. The town at first viewed him with suspicion, waiting for the curse to break. But day after day, Kwadwo performed his tasks, speaking only the necessary truth. He didn't claim to catch a ton of fish, he said. "I caught 12 kilos today, which is average." He became a strange fixture, respected not for what he claimed to be, but for what he was. His first priority, however, was Ajoa and his mother, May Mabina. He didn't try to win Ajoa back with grand promises. He knew the sand would stop him. Instead, he worked. Every few days, he would quietly leave a small sum of his meager earnings beneath a stone near her stall, with a note, "Repayment. This is honest money." He never asked for forgiveness, only for the chance to repair the damage. Slowly, Ajoa moved from outright contempt to a guarded, wary tolerance. With May Mabina, the reconciliation was easier, built on unspoken love. Kwadwo helped her with her morning chores and joined her in her prayers, kneeling in quiet humility. The gilded tongue was quiet now, but the heart had finally begun to speak. The ultimate test came months later. A high-ranking official from Accra visited Kita, seeking a local project manager for a major government initiative to modernize the fishing harbor. The job required trust, leadership, and, above all, honesty. Kofi and Ebo, of course, were the first to jostle for attention. They cleaned their clothes, polished their lies, and stood before the official, puffing out their chests. Kofi swore he had managed a large fleet for years. "My fleets bring in more catches than any other port, sir." Ebo claimed vast financial experience. I oversaw millions in currency trade, sir, ensuring every Sadie was accounted for. The official, a tired man used to coastal swagger, listened with a skeptical frown. Finally, his eyes fell upon Quadwo, standing quietly to the side. "And you, young man," the official asked, "what is your experience? Why should I trust you with this project?" Quadwo felt the familiar tickle of temptation, the old urge to lie and impress, but the muscle in his tongue tightened. He knew the taste of sand was imminent. He took a breath and spoke the painful, unwavering truth. "Sir, I have no management experience. I am a fisherman, and I am a man who was once the worst liar in this town. I stole money from a woman I claimed to love. I ran from my family. I am not ambitious, but I will tell you this. I will not steal a single Sadie from this project, because if I try, my tongue will swell, and I will stand here mute until I publicly confess it. I am cursed to be honest. That is my only qualification." The town waited for the official to laugh and dismiss him. But the official did not laugh. He simply stared at Quadwo for a long, quiet moment, then turned to his aide. "Hire him," the official said, his voice decisive. "I have heard 50 charming lies this week. Give me the man who cannot afford to tell one more." Quadwo was given the job. It was a position of authority and genuine influence, a stark contrast to the small, empty power he'd once chased. But he refused the grandeur, choosing only to draw a simple salary, ensuring the rest of the funds went directly to better the lives of the town's fishermen. His reward was not wealth, but the dignity of earned trust. Quadwo's story became a legend in Kita, the boy who was cured of silence but permanently cursed with truth. He never forgot the dry cough, the metallic taste of sand, or the swollen tongue. They were the constant, unseen whips of Togbitsali, reminding him of his debt. He often visited the ancestral grove, not out of fear, but out of gratitude. The earth had not drowned him in water, but stripped him bare with fire. The moral of his life whispered on the sea wind. Some punishments are not meant to destroy you, but to strip away the mask of falsehood so the true self can breathe. The hardest lesson of all is learning to live with a tongue that will not permit you to lie. The old water curse had been replaced by the silent sand and the gilded tongue's permanent truthfulness. The town was left with a powerful living testament that sometimes the price of a careless act comes quietly, one devastating truth at a time. Thank you for watching and listening to our story. In the comment section, please let us know where you're watching from and share your thoughts on our story. Also, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share for more stories. See you in the next video. Bye!